The order, will the secretary please call the roll?
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Thayer,
Here.
Senator Yates, Representative Bridges, Representative Frazier Gordon, Representative Grossberg, Representative Lewis,
Here.
Senator West.
Here.
We have a quorum.
With a quorum being present, the subcommittee is duly constituted to do business. First matter of business is approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the minutes? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. Moving right into our business, we would like to kindly recognize our new members we have with us. I guess this goes by seniority. So we have Senator Sen Thayer with us on the committee. Congratulations. Or condolences. And
I'm happy to be here.
and we have co-chair Derek Lewis is with us today. Congratulations. You're not quite with us yet. We need to elect you.
Understand.
Here in a minute. And then we have Representative Daniel Grossberg. Congratulations and welcome to the committee. Moving right into the election process, co-chair David Hale resigned his position, and co-chair Derek Lewis has been appointed to fill the unexpired portion of that term, and we now need to hold an election for that position. Is there a nomination from a House member of the committee for the position of House co-chair of the subcommittee?
I'd like to nominate Representative Derek Lewis.
We have a nomination. A second is received. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, is there a motion from a House member that nominations cease? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Let me rephrase that. Is there a motion that nominations cease and Representative Lewis be elected by acclamation? We have a motion and a second on that. So a motion has been made and seconded that nominations cease and that Representative Lewis be elected House co-chair by acclamation. Without objection, it is so ordered. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Now we'll get to work. I apologize for being late and the delay. Please call the first regulation.
Secretary of State, 30 KAR 9010 with amendment.
This regulation establishes the form that a candidate for governor must file with the Secretary of State to properly designate his or her lieutenant governor. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with 13A drafting requirements.
Would the Secretary of State come forward, please? Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Adams, Secretary of State.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Is there a second? Without objection, is so ordered. So we have before us the new regulation from the Secretary of State with staff amendment. Would you like to say anything about the regs, Mr. Secretary? Or
That was a pretty good summary. I'll just add that in 2020 regular session, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 336, which among other things says as follows: not later than 4 p.m. on the second Tuesday in August preceding the regular election for the office of governor, the candidate shall designate his or her running mate by filing with the Secretary of State the name and address of a person qualified under the Constitution of Kentucky to serve as lieutenant governor. And all that this regulation does is incorporate this simple form, which follows to the letter which you all provided in that bill.
Gotcha. Any questions or comments from members? Senator Yates.
What about using your middle name?
Very nice. Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
State Board of Elections, 31 KAR 2030 ordinary, and emergency. These do not have additional amendments.
312030, emergency and ordinary, establish the requirements for the approval and certification of e-poll book products used in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon, Taylor Brown, General Counsel for the Kentucky State Board of Elections.
Thank you. As she stated, there are no amendments. Do we have any questions from members? This is what I would call, this is a hot button issue in the state elections and things. So could you give us a little bit more detail other than the summary of what this is in effect doing with these poll books?
Sure. So previously, well, actually right now, there is just one vendor that supplies poll books, electronic poll books for the entire state. The e-poll book, of course, being what replaced the hand-signed signature roster when you go in to vote. So to open that up, so we don't just have one vendor with a monopoly throughout the state, legislation was introduced last session that spurred this regulation, opening it up to any vendor that wanted to apply to be certified in the state. And we've had a number now go through that process, and this coming primary we'll see some competition, and it'll be open to multiple vendors.
So what was the prior vendor?
10X Systems out of Tampa, Florida.
Okay. And do you know off the top of your head how many possible vendors there are now?
So we had four
that have applied.
vendors. We had four vendors apply to get certified in the state. 10X was one of them, and then 3 additional vendors.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Auditor of Public Accounts, 45 KWR 1050 with staff suggested amendments.
This regulation amends to update the Physical Court Audit Guide to conform auditing procedures and report forms to current auditing standards and fiscal court practices. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with 13A drafting requirements.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Farrah Petter, and I'm the Assistant State Auditor. And with me is John Great, and he's our Chief of Staff.
A pleasure to appear before a committee so well staffed by nationally recognized leading staffers.
Oh, okay. You know how to get a regulation through, don't you? Very, very good. And you're used to judiciary committee, so welcome to the Administrative Branch Committee.
Thank you, Chairman.
There's staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendment? We have motion. We have motion and second without objection is so ordered. Any questions from members on these regulations? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Chairman
you.
and members of the committee.
Finance and Administration Cabinet Teachers Retirement System, 102 KAR 1361 emergency and ordinary. The ordinary version has staff suggested amendments.
102-1361, emergency and ordinary, establish the disability benefits for TRS 4 members with less than 5 years of credible Kentucky service. The staff suggested amendment to the ordinary regulation amends various sections and the material incorporated by reference to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A and make technical changes.
Would you please identify yourself for the record? Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? There's a motion and a second without objection is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regulations from TRS? I have one quick question. TRS 4 members, what specifically is TRS 4? Is that the tier or is that? Yeah. Could you make sure the green light's on?
Excuse me.
There you go.
Yes. There was legislation enacted during the 2021 session, House Bill 258, and it established a new tier for individuals who become members of TRS on or after January 1st, 2022. So it's a new tier, about a year old.
This is the newest tier. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't have any further questions. Any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kentucky Retirement Systems, 105 KAR 1, 071, 371, 451 emergency. And this last one, 105 KAR 1, 451, has a staff suggested amendment.
1071 repeals 105 KR 1070, allocation of special appropriation for military service credit, as the authorizing statute has been repealed. 105 1371 repeals 105 1370, Kentucky Retirement Systems personnel policies, because it is outdated and no longer needed. 105 KR 1451, an emergency, establish the forms and procedures for quasi-governmental agency employers participating in the Kentucky Employees Retirement System to report persons serving as independent contractors and leased employees. The staff suggested amendment for the ordinary amends various sections to comply with drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Harry Bash, Staff Attorney Supervisor, Kentucky Public Pensions Authority.
Jessica Bobian, Policy Specialist with Kentucky Public Pensions Authority.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions from members on these KRS regs? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Real Estate Commission, 201 KAR 11, 121, with an agency amendment.
This regulation is being amended to remove the requirement to disclose prior contact with a former prospective client involved in the contemplated transaction and make changes to forms. The agency amendment amends Section 11 to revise incorporated forms for clarity and to align form content with current regulatory provisions.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Lois Ann DeSpinett, Chair of the Kentucky Real Estate Commission.
August Poske, General Counsel to the Kentucky Real Estate Authority.
Thank you so much. We have on this set of regs an agency amendment. Is there any discussion on the agency amendment? Senator Yates.
Mr. Chair, I may have jumped to, it's on the underlining bill, so on the amendment I'm okay with.
Okay, we'll get there in a minute. Is there a motion for approval of the agency amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection is so ordered. So we have before us the KREC regs as amended by the agency amendment. Now, Senator Yates, did you have your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry to jump the gun.
You're good.
And this was deferred from August previously onto it. And to me, I'm tinker a little bit in transactions onto it, but a lot of times you're going to deal with corporations and companies that may be selling lots of different real estate and stuff. And so while I can see the intent of this, can you tell us how that will work in the event that if you've represented members or partnerships of different buying groups or LLCs that own property, would that still have to be a disclosure under this?
You're talking about, I just want to make sure I understand, that if we're selling for a company that has an LLC and they flip houses or whatever.
Could you pull that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a little closer.
I'm sorry, I have a little hoarse. Are you saying that if we have an LLC that flips houses, are we going to have to fill one of these out each time? Is that your question? I'm not sure I understood.
Well, my question, so I'm a minority owner, a percentage owner in several different companies. And different companies, we own different properties, real estate transactions. In the event that I'm a member of one of these, and let's say I go to purchase a different property, would there have to be a disclosure that each of those members, how deep in the weeds are we going to dive on this?
No.
Thank you, Senator. The forms and the description within this ethics code for licensees doesn't speak to parties' substantive obligations of their own in a transaction. This is really about what the licensees need to present. So that the commission isn't really going to be able to answer the question about a hypothetical in your situation with those types of parties.
And if I may follow up?
Sure. Yep.
And if there's ignorance in my questions, please explain. But I meant if me and an LLC were going to purchase from a real estate agent, and that real estate agent has the property in which I'm purchased of, if they have represented any other member of that? Will they have to disclose that, or if it's only when it's person-to-person ownership? So like a lot of times what I've seen is buying groups. So you'll have 6 or 7 different owners of a medical practice, for instance, we're going to be selling. Would you have to disclose who were underneath that umbrella, or is it just on the front line disclosure?
Well, when you were talking about the practice, of course, we're not selling practice. We're selling homes and things like that. As far as answering your question, I'm going to have to defer to our legal counsel on that.
So yes, specifically what the regulation does is it removes the requirement to disclose prior contact with a former prospective client who is involved in the contemplated real estate transaction. It does remove that requirement for the licensee.
So it does?
That's what the regulation amendment will do. It deletes the requirement to disclose the prior contact with a former prospective client who is involved in the presently contemplated real estate transaction.
Okay, and that's one of my partners is he's an attorney in this area. So if I did a poor job explaining that, thank you. Tell me why we want to do that. Why we want to remove that requirement to make that disclosure.
Where we started with this, and it's been going for a long time because we wanted to make sure that we understood what we needed, what the licensees felt, and one discussion that we had several times is I live in a rural town, and I know most all the people. I've been selling 46 years. I don't sell every house. I sure like to, but I don't. But when I go to the grocery store and I see Dee putting up the cantaloupes, I holler over, "Hey, Dee, you ready to buy a house?" No. So I go around to the meat counter and I say, "Hey, Tiffany, you ready to sell yours?" Well, we got into, am I making an agency relationship at that time? Am I going to have to carry forms around and get everybody, "Dee, I just asked you about buying. You're going to have to sign this." So we wanted to have it so that when you really got into a situation, you know who's representing you and who's not. And so agency can change. When I come out to list your house, I'm working for you. But it could change because I might sell it to my cousin. So at that point, I will become a dual agent. And so we wanted to make it where it was clean. And that we had licensees that were taking their form. Some were not getting them signed. Some were taking them at the wrong time. They were sending them to the other. If I had a house listed, an agent A may send me the agency form. Well, I didn't need to know what they were doing with their client. So this just kind of makes it all clean. I hope I answered that for you.
If I may, Mr. Chair. I think that I was overthinking. Thank you for taking the time to explain that. Thank you.
I have a question that I, over here. Could you talk about the disclosure form and the difference between commercial, residential? What type of transactions does this apply to? Does it apply to all transactions or just residential?
The seller disclosure?
Both, agency and seller disclosure. So the seller disclosure should be just residential, right?
And apartments, duplex,
4 family and below, right? Yeah, okay. So that's the seller disclosure.
Yes, sir.
So the agency disclosure, which we just discussed, is that across the board?
I don't sell commercial, so August.
I'm actually not aware of the answer to that question offhand. I'd have to look into that.
Okay. We can follow up with that later, but I thought that may help answer Senator Yates' question if the property was commercial or not, or okay. So, yes, Grossberg, Representative Grossberg. Sorry,
that's right.
I'm slow.
It's clear the wording former prospective client. If someone has been an actual client, we know that has to be disclosed, but what is the triggering mechanism? What if instead of just jokingly asking Dee in the grocery store if she's ready to buy a house, you've actually written offers for her previously that did not result in a successful transaction, but you, at least for the time being, had a true fiduciary representative relationship with her. Would that have to be disclosed in future transactions where she'll be on the other side of the table?
Yes, sir.
Any further questions from members? Representative Bridges.
I've just got one quick question that one of my partners asked me to check on, and it's on the buyer's agency. And it's down under Part A. It says the principal broker being retained, the word retained. The question is, does that have any implication of requiring payment for that as a buyer's agency or something without a...
August and I have discussed this morning, and I'm going to let him give you his interpretation of the word retain.
Thank you. And to be clear, the agency has put forward this form. My discussion here is just to help provide the information and context. The term retained here in this form is not necessarily going to imply that somebody's going to be paid for the services. It's retention in the professional relationship sense, similar to how you might find it in other professional fields.
Okay, so a paid buyer's agency would have to require the buyer's agency agreement between the buyer and the agent for their services and the amount.
I'm sorry, you were going to say?
Okay, could you repeat that question?
You can be a buyer's agent paid by the buyer, and we've got a separate form for that. So
Yes,
that
sir.
form would be required to be signed before there'd be any expectation of a payment using the word retained in this circumstance.
That is my understanding.
Yes, and I would say that this form talks about disclosing the relationships, the determination of who's paying whom for what in the transaction is not part of this form.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Social Work, 201 KAR 23016. This does not have additional amendments.
This regulation establishes requirements to address the shortage of social work professionals in Kentucky.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Mark Kelly, Executive Director of the Kentucky Board of Social Work.
Thank you.
We would like to defer this regulation if possible.
That is perfectly fine with me. Is it okay with members? Looks like it's fine.
Okay.
We grant your request to defer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Board of Registration for Professional Geologists, 201 KAR 31010 and 031, and the last two have staff suggested amendments, is 040 and 050.
201-31010 is being amended to increase fees, add new fees for inactive renewal, late inactive renewal, and inactive reinstatement, and delete processing fees for the national licensing examinations. 201-31031 repeals 201-31030, temporary permission to practice, because it is no longer necessary and has never been used since its implementation. 201-31040 is being amended to remove examination deferrals and references to examination fees, update the application for registration as a professional geologist, and add an authorization for release of records form. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A. 201-31050 is being amended to add new language relating to inactive renewals and reactivations, make changes due to the merger of the incorporation by reference forms, and delete previous material incorporated by reference, and instead use a registration and certification renewal and reinstatement form that is a unified form. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with the drafting and formatting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Jeremy Sylvester, Counsel for the Board.
Bill Brab, Chairman of the Board.
Thank you so much. There are staff amendments. Is there a motion for approval of staff amendments? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions from members on this set of regulations? Representative Frazier Gordon.
Hi, could you please let me know when the last fees were set, how long a time period has elapsed, and
2001 was the initial fee with a minor modification in 2009 for going from annual to every other year.
and is there increased office costs, or what is the reason for the increase?
Yes, increased office costs for, from DPL. The records we have from 2013 on show an increase of about $20,000 per year, fiscal year.
Thank you.
Committee will stand at ease. Just one second. I think I'm going to ask you. Okay, I have a question on it's in my summary, where it's KR 31030. It says temporary permission to practice because the administrative reg is no longer necessary and has never been used since its implementation. Could you go into that just a little bit and describe what's happening there?
Yeah, I believe that was implemented at the time of the. A little closer.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the specific piece there was administered when the regs were first drafted in, I believe, 1994, and there was a grace period for folks to become licensed under the program at that time, and those folks could request that temporary act to be able to practice until they could fulfill the requirements per the application process and testing requirements. To date, at least during my tenure, there has been no requests of that, and there was no record of it when we went to review that.
So it's a cleanup, basically.
Yes,
Gotcha.
that's right.
Any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, 301 KAR 2, 015, 75, 81, and 82. The last three have staff suggested amendments.
301-2015 amends dates regarding feeding of wildlife. 301-2075 amends provisions related to wildlife rehabilitation permits to update definitions, prohibit cervid rehabilitation from chronic wasting disease zones, add requirements for handling rabies vector species, and update incorporated material. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 301-2081 amends requirements for transporting and holding native wildlife to update definitions, establish an online permitting system, clarify and update permit requirements, update species exemptions, and update incorporated material. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A. 301-2082 amends requirements for transporting and holding exotic wildlife, to establish an online permitting system, update provisions for permit denial and revocation, update species exemptions, prohibit the importation and possession of wild rabbits, hares, pikas, and lynx, and update incorporated material. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A and amends Section 10.5C to establish conditions for euthanasia for confiscated wildlife.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Stephen Fields, Staff Attorney.
Commissioner Rich Storm.
Dan Feiger, Assistant Director, Wildlife Division.
Thank you so much. There are staff amendments. Do we have a motion for approval of the staff amendments? We have a motion. We have a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. We have before us the regs as amended by staff amendments. Any commentary or anything you want to discuss here? Or when you got the sale, be quiet. You know, just shut up. Yeah. Any questions from members? Seeing none, have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Department of Agriculture, 302 KAR 40010 with staff suggested amendment.
302-4010 updates the process for certification of organic agricultural products to clarify processes, increase fees, and revise incorporated forms and the Organic Certification Program Quality Manual. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections to comply with KRS Chapter 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Clint Quarles, Counsel for the Department.
Ryan Burnett, Director of the Plant Division.
Could you make sure that green light's on there?
Ryan Burnett, Director of the Plant Division.
Thank you.
Abigail George, Organic Program Specialist.
Thank you. There is a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it's so ordered. We have the regs as amended with staff amendment. Do we have any questions from members? So as with any reg, I see increased fees. So if you could just go into that real quick and tell us how much you're increasing fees.
We are doubling the fees
Oh.
for the organic program. That's a good catch. The fees haven't been touched since at least prior to 2004. When you all look at the backside of the reg and our financial analysis on it, with doubling of fees, we can attempt to recoup things like gas and vehicles. This is a loss-leading program for the department, but provides a pretty big public service for the participants.
So could you give us an example of the fees, like how it doesn't need to be in-depth, just a rough example of how much the fee is for the product and what it's going to?
So if you're looking at it, if you're an organic certified crop farm, the current fee is $250 to become certified. After the fee increase, it jumps up to $500. But then with the USDA cost share, that would drop that fee back down to that $250. That is a $500 up to 50% of your certification cost.
So the department will be pulling down some federal funds, basically, by increasing.
Yes, we administer the USDA organic cost share program.
So once you pay your $500, you get your organic certification. You have USDA organic.
Mm-hmm.
Is this where that happens, or is there another layer that USDA has to come in and do that as well, or is it all together?
It's essentially all together. So
Okay.
we ask in the application and then on the inspection if they want to participate in the cost share program. And if they say yes, once they become certified, then we issue the check to them from a pool of money that USDA allots to us.
Thank you. Senator Thayer has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the fee stayed at $250, do you pull down $125 from the cost share program?
Yes.
Did the industry ask for these increases?
There is widespread support through the industry for these increases. Even with these increases as a state program, we're about 4 times less than the next certifier out there.
I know you can't speak for the industry because they're not here, but why would they ask for fee increases to be levied on them?
To maintain our viability in providing this service. I mean, we're literally, if you don't go with us, the next fee is about 4 times as much. And to just ensure that we're still available to provide these services, we've got a letter of support from an organization of organic farmers in Kentucky that wish to maintain us still in business.
Do you have a commitment from them in writing that they're not going to pass the increased costs on to consumers who buy organic goods in Kentucky?
I don't believe their letter includes that.
That would be my main concern. And anytime fees go up, it's ultimately going to be passed on to the consumer. So I don't know. I don't buy a lot of organic food, but maybe someone else can help with that. Senator Yates, no shocker there. I mean, with hair like that, you must eat organic.
So to be clear, to circle back a little bit, you've got certified USDA organic. If the department doesn't do this, there are private entities who will.
Yes.
And you're saying that the industry is saying, please stay in business because you're cheaper than
The alternatives.
the alternative private sector certifier.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Senator Yates, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that you were trying to explain that because in areas where it's not subsidized and it goes to the market, the competition, there's increased cost. And we talked earlier about whether or not the cost will be put on to the consumer. Well, it's all a supply and demand as well. So everybody, they're going to make as much money as they can make. The better, the more organic competition you can put out there is it's going to reduce the cost. If you only have one or two places to get the organic foods, those costs can be relatively high. And by this service being provided as subsidized service at a lower cost, you provide more people to the market. And if we lose this in Kentucky, in this area, we're going to have less organic farmers to the market. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
So you actually lower the cost. See how we did that?
In a sense,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Put that in the letter.
But this reg definitely increases the cost.
Senator Thayer.
You didn't follow me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With Senator Yates sounding like an avowed supply sider, supply and demand economics, I'm in. You got my support for it now.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department for Environmental Protection, Division for Air Quality, 401 KAR 63060 without additional amendments.
401 63060 amends the list of hazardous air pollutants to add 1-bromopropane.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Michael Kennedy. I'm the director for the Division for Air Quality.
Thank you so much. There are no amendments, so no need for motions. Any questions from members of the committee on this reg? Quick question for myself. What is bromopropane?
It is a solvent for cleaning metals and different materials.
Okay. Will this have a negative impact on industry as far as car business, that type of thing, or?
I think at first it's not going to have any impact, and really it may not in the future. Really the impact up front is that we're going to be collecting information on who uses it. And then EPA may in the future develop a reg to restrict the emissions of 1-bromopropane, but that's not occurred yet.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justice and Public Safety Cabinet, Department of Corrections, 501 KAR 6050 with staff suggested amendment.
This regulation amends to update the policies and procedures of Luther Leckett Correctional Complex, including adding a new policy on ADA and inmate access. The staff amendment amends various sections and the material incorporated by reference for clarity and to comply with 13A drafting requirements.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Amy Barker, Assistant General Counsel, here for the Department of Corrections.
Amelia Howe, Justice Program Administrator, Department of Corrections.
Thank you. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? Do we have a second? We have a motion for approval of the staff amendment. Do we have a second? We have a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Any questions from members? Seeing none, I'm not going to ask any questions on juvenile justice. Yeah, that'll be another day. Another month, right. No questions? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department for Medicaid Services, 907 KAR 3160 with a staff suggested amendment.
This regulation amends to incorporate changes made by Senate Bill 8, including to define and use new terms, to allow for investigation by the Children's Advocacy Centers, allow new provider types, expand the concept of a child medical evaluation, expand payment methodology to reflect the true and actual cost, include reimbursement provisions, to utilize an enhanced fee schedule or in the alternative and at the option of the Child Advocacy Center during the implementation phase, an updated comprehensive rate that can be billed, implement a prospective payment system rate reimbursement, to require MCOs to use cost reports and cost surveys developed and implemented by Department of Medicaid Services, to include provisions for laboratory services, and to reserve the ability to completely remove this benefit and provider type from managed care in order to lessen the administrative burden. The staff suggested amendment amends various sections for clarity and to comply with 13A.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Scott, a Regulation Coordinator for Department for Medicaid Services.
There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, is so ordered. Do we have any questions from members on this set of regulations? This was in response to Senate Bill 8.
Yes.
Could you just briefly talk about the MCO part, what we're requiring of the MCOs and that interplay there, please?
So after we had this filed, we had some additional discussions, and we are carving this out entirely from the MCOs. So it's going to be a fee-for-service benefit moving forward. They're going to submit the cost reports to us, and we're just going to pay them from there.
So you're basically bypassing the MCOs?
Yes.
Gotcha. And that's that was with full approval. That was with legislative.
Yes.
That was the intent of the legislature and to do so, I'm assuming.
We had the authority to do that, and as we move forward, we realized that a lot of the child advocacy centers were not participating with the MCO, so that there was only about half of them that were participating. So we want to make sure that this provider type is fully implemented and fully participating with the Medicaid children. That's half plus of the kids in the state. So we want to make sure that that they're fully able to participate and that there are no barriers to participation. And so we went ahead and carved.
This is my last question. So was there a problem with the child advocacy centers pulling down monies from the MCOs? Were they slow walking funds to? Was that part of the problem, or was it just to make less bureaucracy, I guess is?
I think that would need to be a larger discussion, a larger investigation, or anything like that. We, just from what we saw, it looked like there was only about, I think that there's 15. There were anywhere between 7 to 8 that were participating. We wanted to get that a little bit higher, and we wanted to make sure that there was really no additional barriers. The more we looked at this, the more we saw this regulation. It kind of it hindered their ability to participate fully in the Medicaid program. So
the centers were leaving money on the table, basically.
Yes.
Gotcha. Senator Rocky Adams.
Yeah, I'll just correct for the record, and I believe I'm correct in this statement. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services did not increase the reimbursement rate. Senate Bill 8 required them to increase the reimbursement rate for child advocacy centers. So there's some mincing of words here, but the truth is Senate Bill 8 did right by the child advocacy centers so that they could actually get reimbursed for the cost of the exams that were being performed, because they were having to raise private dollars for that instead of being reimbursed with public dollars.
Thank you, Senator Adams, for clarification. Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the comment from Senator Adams. Is the Cabinet complying with Senate Bill 8?
Yes. Yes.
Do you agree with that, Senator Adams? If I may cross-examine?
You may.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
If Senator Adams is satisfied, and so am I. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Department for Developmental Health, Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities, 908 KAR 1374, without additional amendments.
This regulation is being amended to implement a state plan amendment to extend Medicaid coverage to new mothers for 1 year following the birth of a child in accordance with Senate Bill 178 of the 2022 regular session of the General Assembly, and clarify language related to household size of the pregnant person.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
I'm Rachel Ratliff. I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Behavioral Health, Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And that summary is not my reg.
That's what I was looking at as well. Next on my docket is licensure of non-hospital-based outpatient alcohol and other drug treatment entities. Is that
is my reg.
Gotcha. So someone else want to read the summary based on that reg?
908-1374. Licensure of non-hospital-based outpatient alcohol and other drug treatment entities.
Correct.
amends to implement a state plan amendment to extend Medicaid coverage to new mothers for 1 year following the birth of a child in accordance with Senate Bill 178 of the 2022 regular session of the General Assembly and clarify language related to household size of the pregnant person.
I have my regulatory impact analysis that has a summary statement there, if you would like for me to potentially read that one.
That's okay. There's just a little bit of confusion on our end. It's fine. You're perfectly fine, unless members would prefer that to be read. I see no need for it. Thank you. There are no amendments, so we have any questions from members on this set of regulations? Seeing none, please call the next regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Department for Community-Based Services, 922 KAR 2 165. This has a staff suggested amendment and an agency amendment.
This regulation establishes the Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership. The staff suggested amendment amends Section 3 to comply with the drafting requirements of KRS Chapter 13A. The agency amendment amends Section 8 for clarity, Section 9 to update the addition date of material incorporated by reference, and the material incorporated by reference for consistency with the regulation.
Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Began, and I'm the Regulation Coordinator for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Day. I'm the Division Director for the Division of Child Care.
Thank you so much. There's a staff amendment. Is there a motion for approval of the staff amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection is so ordered. There's also an agency amendment. Is there any discussion on the agency amendment? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval of the agency amendment? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, it is so ordered. We have before us the regulation with staff amendment and agency amendment. Any questions from members? Could you just briefly describe what this partnership will do, what
Yes,
the
sir.
reg does?
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to. This regulation implements House Bill 499 from last session, which put into effect an Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership. This is a new program through which an employer and the state will be able to contribute towards an employee's child care cost. So the intent of this administrative regulation and the legislation from last year is to help employers obtain and maintain employees that have children in child care. We've presented before on the cost of child care, the importance of the Child Care Assistance Program, and just how the cost of childcare can make a big impact, can be a really big decision point in a family's decision to return to work or obtain employment. So we hope that this program is beneficial in helping employers attract and retain their employees with children in childcare.
Thank you so much. Any questions from members on this regulation? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That concludes our meeting for this month. Do we have any other business from any members to come before the committee? Welcome all new members. This is probably one of the easiest meetings that you'll be involved in, least controversial. So this meeting is now adjourned.
The next meeting we have scheduled for February 13th, which is a Monday at 1 p.m.
Monday at 1 p.m. Mark your calendar. Any other business? This meeting's adjourned.
Robert or something? I'd like to say